I don't ever do. Yeah.
I'd like to call to order the City of Saugatuck City Council workshop meeting for Wednesday, July 3rd. If the clerk could please call the roll.
Here. Baldwin.
Here.
Bean.
Here.
Gardner.
Here.
Muncy.
Here.
Stanton.
Here.
White.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right. Any agenda changes or deletions? Any guest speakers today? Okay, so it's on for public comment on agenda items only. If you have something that's not on the agenda, there will be a second opportunity at the end of the meeting, but this would be for agenda items only. So if there's anyone in the room who would like to speak. And if you could please just state your first and last name and where you live.
Hi, Seth Arthur, Barnum attorney. I represent property owners, business owners, concerned citizens, and property managers in the Saugatuck community, the Saugatuck neighbors, that recognize the proposed regulations on the short-term rentals in the R1 district would A, not be good for the city, is not supported by many residents, and is illegal. The number of clients we represent is rapidly growing due to the Planning Commission's recommendation. So I'm here to request the council also for the cap. As an initial matter, the cap seems premature and potentially unnecessary. Recently, the city passed restrictions on short-term rentals, including noise, licensing, occupancy, trash. You should see if those restrictions work. It's not even been a full season with those restrictions. The restrictions protect residents and neighborhoods, so wait and see if they work, because they're designed to regulate short-term rentals. The task force report that the city engaged McKenna for also has key findings that it should encourage the council to reject the cap. Just one example, on page 16, the task force acknowledged further review and analysis of instituting a cap may be required. No definitive direction on caps was achieved. Continued discussions pertaining to caps should continue. Short-term rentals have economic benefits that will be lost with a cap. My clients are concerned with the economic impact and dramatic harm done to the city with this proposed cap. The loss of tourism would be felt beyond the city limits. The task force report on page 65 concludes from a survey, full and part-time residents both agree that short-term rentals have the benefits of supporting tourism and business in the city. There are a ton of unanswered questions the PC's proposal does not answer. Too many questions for the council to seriously consider the cap. What data supports a 20% cap? Why not a higher percentage? Is grandfathering status lost if I sell to my own family? What if the short-term rental is left to me in a will? How will available licenses be issued if the number falls below 20%? There is clearly much more work to be done and more public opinion to be heard and considered. The practical concerns aside, there are real legal concerns with the cap proposal. Equal protection issues. The U.S. and Michigan Constitution guarantee equal protection of the law, which requires the city to not treat similarly situated parties differently. By allowing some properties to have a short-term rental while denying other similarly situated properties, the city is inviting constitutional challenges. Taking without just compensation. Michigan law prevents the government from taking a private property for public use without just compensation to the property owner. By putting this cap into place, the city would certainly be diminishing property values of those with current short-term rentals. Is the city ready to pay challenges for the loss in value of their properties? Not all buyers desire to rent, but they find comfort in knowing that they could if they fell on hard times. So along with those, there's also potential zoning Enabling Act violations. And so for the practical reasons, the legal considerations, I request that the council reject the Planning Commission's proposal tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, Timothy Straker, 333 Culver Street. First of all, I really appreciate the work that you guys and the Planning Commission are doing just to explore the edges of this issue, because I know the edges are where the uncomfortable conversations are. So I know there's a lot of opinions on both sides, so thanks for that work. I just wanted to make 3 comments. One, I think we have an amazing Convention and Visitors Bureau. I think the work they are doing is top-notch and better than any other community in Michigan for sure. So I am confident that tourists will not go elsewhere based on the really great work that our CVB is doing if anything happens with a short-term cap. Number 2, to that point, I'm a little frustrated at the extreme sort of point of view that tourists will go away, that we're sort of hearing about in social media. This is a charming town. People come here for restaurants, and I would also ask in my second point that maybe if it hasn't been done, reach out to the SEA. I know the SEA does every other year research on the radius of day visitors that also frequent the SEA, which is a pretty high stat of the number of people that come here. I'm sure the CVB has looked at some of that data, but point being the number of people that come here for day trips that also fuel our residential, our retail and our restaurant scene is pretty important. Lastly, I'm an executive leader in one of the largest employers here in the area, and it's practically impossible for me to recruit people to come live here full-time. They choose East Grand Rapids, they choose Holland, they choose anywhere but the city of Saugatuck because they don't want to live in the chaos of short-term rentals. So our reputation sort of precedes us in that. And there's nothing I'd like more than to have people from the coast or even international who we're bringing here reside here and add to the fabric of the community. So thanks for the work you're doing regardless of where you land. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Joe Clark, 419 Francis Street in Saugatuck. I'd also like to thank each and every one of you for your service to our great city. I'm standing up here because as one of your planning commissioners, I did vote in support of the 20% cap in residential neighborhoods. And I wanted to share with you really the three reasons that, you know, at least I internalized and helped drive me to that decision. First and foremost was, you know, our Tri-Community Master Plan, which I read painfully before taking on the role as commissioner. And, you know, it says it all in the very first goal of the charter, which is that we retain the quiet, scenic, and small town rural character of the tri-communities. My second reason was after reading our zoning preamble, which pretty much states for every residential zone, the district is designed to protect and promote low-density, single-family residential uses development in the city. And my third reason, probably the strongest reason, was the voice of the people that live here in the city. Both you know, listening through the short-term rental task force, for which I was also a member, and sitting in on the planning meetings, you know, it's clear that there's some very strong feelings from some of the residents, a lot of the residents that have stood up. Secondly, the survey data that we took under the short-term rental task force that clearly and pretty much unambiguously demonstrates that our residents support caps in residential neighborhoods, 60+%. And also the survey data that if you look under the covers shows that the residents that do support caps by far favor 20%, on the order of 60 to 70% as far as the cap levels that they'd like to see. Now, as I listen to the public at large, at least to me, the debate seems to center around money and economics versus quality of life. That's quantitative versus qualitative. And I understand that's a very difficult distinction to make. One's somewhat subjective and the other can be considered objective. But this in itself, to me, is a clear message to, and it should be to our leadership, for which I consider myself a part, right? That our residential neighborhoods are being commercialized at the expense of people who want to call this place their home. This doesn't sit well with me as a commissioner. It certainly doesn't sit well with me as a resident, and I hope it does not sit well with you as elected officials. Now, I know nobody who doesn't appreciate the benefits STRs bring to our city, but we need to find a balance to the mix to be fair to the people who still want to live here and call this our home. Listen to the residents and the voters in this city. Let's implement a uniform cap, 20% across our residential zones. We'll give you time to see if it works. You can tune it up and down, but we really need to do something. I watched too many, on a personal note, I watched too many friends and family leave. I don't want to see it continue. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Hello, Ethan Barty, property owner in the city of Saugatuck, also in the township. I do not support caps on STRs for several reasons. Our family came to this community 20 years ago. It's been a resort town well beyond that. We moved here knowing that it was a resort town. As a matter of fact, you put a cap on STRs, make people sell it as a family home. This town was built on cottages. There's a lot of houses that families can't live in. So you're going to decrease the value of their property by not allowing them to have the STRs. You know, you've heard a lot of people against or for the caps, and they've been a loud voice. I think we need to really put it out there to the businesses, do an economic study, or really get the vibe of the town, because I don't think that we're reaching everybody and getting everybody's voice. The loss of property value can be as high as 30%. You know, you're picking winners and losers. You know, last gentleman just said the residential district. Well, as far as I'm concerned, you know, I heard the proposal, it's R1. That's not all the residential districts. So you're picking R1. What about R2? What about Lake Street? I don't know. Maybe people live on Lake Street that might want to sell and don't want to reduce their property value by 30%. I believe that there are a lot of things in place that can help with the rules. I think 10 months out of the year, you can shoot a cannon down the street. There's no one here. I think we need more people in the community. I think we need more people to come and enjoy the restaurants, the clothing stores. Money, money, money. It is about money. The stores need money. We need money for taxpayers. I don't believe that a cap is going to do any good. Director rights under the law, including here today in the community that want to protect their rights to reach out to us so we can connect with you with the right resources. We moved to this town 20 years. Proposal, you know, to really consider this proposal tonight. And if it does come to a vote, vote no. Thanks.
Thanks, Ethan.
Thanks, Ethan.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm Bobby Gaunt. I live on the Hill at 341 Main Street in the R1 Community Residential Zone, where there are 123 short-term rentals. 123 is 37% of all dwelling units on the Hill. Well, I don't know how many short-term rentals there were on the Hill when my husband and I purchased our home in 2014. I do know that in 2017, there were a total of 104 citywide, compared to today, where there are 278 citywide. That's 167.3% increase. And there are 123 on the Hill. That degree of unmitigated growth over 7 years came without any consideration on the part of this city that I'm aware of until now for its effect on the character and quality of neighborhood life. If Bob and I had wanted to live in the city among businesses and tourists, we would have purchased a home in the city itself. For our stage of life, though, it was important to live in a neighborhood where we could depend on the quality of life, which neighborhoods actually enable. Qualities such as knowing one's neighbors, light vehicle traffic, quietness, especially as evening comes, a school where one can see and hear children, and a place where one watches out for their neighbors. From my experience, the growth in the number and density of short-term rentals on the Hill has challenged and important aspects changed the quality of my neighborhood life there. I believe it's the job of our public officials to do what they must to ensure that this city remains thriving and vibrant and safe for all, including its citizens who live in the city's neighborhoods, who pay taxes and invest in the city by volunteering, contributing to nonprofits, serving in public positions, and shopping and dining locally. Quoting Brian Skipper of Pleasant Street, and I quote, "Taking a position to limit the density and proliferation of short-term rentals is difficult because it is fundamentally an argument grounded in something inherently nuanced. And that is, at what level of proliferation of businesses in residential areas, does the city lose its essential character?" End of quote. I've lived as a full-time citizen in Saugatuck for 24 years, with 10 of those on the protections of STR licenses already in place being grandfathered. I do believe, however, that if unmitigated growth of short-term rentals is allowed to continue on the part of the city, the character of the city is indeed at risk, and therefore the quality of life of all of its citizens. It is for that reason that I support the 20% cap on short-term rentals as articulated in the motion.
Good afternoon. I'm Steve Manns, 568 Wyrick, Saugatuck, Michigan. As most of you know, I am a member and the chair of the Planning Commission for the City of Saugatuck. On the agenda today is a recommendation regarding the short-term rental licensing that a majority approved at our June 20th Planning Commission meeting. While as chair, I recognize and I fully support the recommendation, I voted no for the recommendation of looking at caps. However, I was a no vote on the recommendation, and some have asked why. So I'd like to briefly recap my reasoning and offer a few points for you to consider today in your discussion. I voted no because I believe the limits on a number of short-term rental licenses in each zone set at 20% of dwellings is way too dramatic. The potential impact of such an action are unknown. I believe if limits are imposed, they should be established with consideration towards how such a limit will create an impact in each zone. Page 48 of today's workshop packet, I think clearly illustrates what I was trying to discuss during the Planning Commission meeting last month. That by imposing a 20% limit, 5 of the 6 zones have virtually no impact. They would be affected by a -1 or 2 or +1 or 2. However, one zone, the commercial residential, would be substantially impacted. Placing a 20% limit on the commercial residential would result in a need for 57 licenses over time to be lost before you would hit that 20% cap. That's 46% of the licenses in that zone. Nearly half would be required. Now, I took this a little further and I started thinking, what if the average house in that zone has about 2.5 to 3 bedrooms? If I take 2.5 on the low end, and I take that times 57 homes, I come up with 142 bedrooms. If I make a really simple assumption that maybe rent it 50 days a season, that's over 7,000 nights of bedrooms. I would ask anybody who's going to come up here and tell me that a 20% across the board is fair, that they give us their plan for how they're going to replace 142 bedrooms or 7,000 nights for tourists to stay in. If you look at the number of hotels here, we have a total of 386 total hotel rooms in the community. Removing 57 or 142 bedrooms on average, that's like 35 to 45% of those. So what I did offer was that maybe we suggest that the community residential zone have a limit that's set at a higher amount. If we used a 25% limit, that would allow 83 licenses, which would still result in a fairly substantial reduction over time of 40 licenses or 25 or 32%. If we use a 30% base for the community residential, that would allow 100 short-term rental licenses, meaning 23 fewer, and it's still an 18%, but now we're talking about something that may be more reasonable. Now, some will say that all zones should have the same limits. I, however, believe that their community residential has some unique characteristics and that a lot of the community residential borders up against other residential zones that we are not incorporating as well as commercial zones. So therefore, I think we can justify having a higher limit within the community residential. And that's kind of what I was saying at the meeting, and I'd ask you to consider it today. Thank you.
All right, Steve, thank you.
Richard Williams, 241 Culver Street, 1050 Elizabeth Street. I'm here to suggest not supporting this proposal. Where is the promised Granicus hotline and the details of verified complaints? This third-party expense to taxpayers will increase when STR fees drop as R1 moves towards the proposed cap. How can an arbitrary cap be considered without well-publicized discussions? That's plural, especially when a cap was not part of the conclusions of the task force. It seems some agendas may want a cap enacted before a Granicus report is made available, perhaps because that report would show there's no community-wide problem with STRs. What are the addresses of the dwellings in the proposed cap's denominator? Despite the time spent by the task force and numerous attempts to extract the dwelling data, and with Councilmember Anderson saying, sifting through different data sources poses problems, property owners need to review the data. I'm a certified residential appraiser and a retired federal agent who has handled data far more substantial and complex than that small finite data set that is R1. It cannot be that difficult. A lot of time and money has been spent trying to quantify dwellings, and it's stunning that the 6/20 Planning Commission meeting with the motion was passed without all the facts. The proposed cap and fewer accommodations for tourists will equate to less retail and restaurant business. Where is the economic impact study? Don't you care about the brick and mortar community where many locals work? I have a dwelling in R1 that has been a rental for decades. It's tiny and not on the hill. Its value will plummet without STR rights transferring to a new owner. This cap infringes on my property rights. What's the city's financial reserve for the legal fees when lawsuits arise? Thank you, and I hope you vote no.
Thanks, Richard.
Tim O'Keefe, 749 Holland Street. High level, I'm against this for several reasons. The regulations have not had time to take effect. The negative impact that's sure to have on businesses, the loss of property value. The market is and will adjust as needed. And then the massive legal challenges and fees that the city's going to see because of this proposal. 3 points. My husband and I started visiting Saugatuck via vacation rentals, which led to us falling in love with Saugatuck. We eventually purchased a weekend place here, which led to us completely renovating a 95-year-old home, and we are now permanent residents. None of that would have happened without access to this town via vacation rentals. We are residents now because we rented some time ago, and vacation rentals are a great marketing tool to get future residents. 2, many people have concerns about the well-being of businesses, and I share that concern. I also constantly hear parking brought up as an issue. I live on Holland Street and often witness hundreds of people walking into downtown. I assume the same is true on Lake, Hoffman, Francis Streets, many others. Those people all walk to downtown presumably to spend money with our great local merchants. As this takes effect and rentals reduce, those people and their dollars will have nowhere to park and their money will be spent elsewhere. This will be crippling for our businesses and for employees. 3, this seemingly arbitrary 20% cap promoted by the Planning Commission will have a significant impact on property values in the city of Saugatuck. Not in Douglas, not in the townships, just in the city of Saugatuck. If approved, this measure would create a very focused 2008 style real estate collapse specifically for the city of Saugatuck, and that would be the legacy of anyone voting for it. I'm adamantly opposed to these caps. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Hello, CJ Badrak, Saugatuck. I gave a correspondence, so I'm not going to rehash a lot of the same things everybody said. Just to want to make sure, collect the data, and get the information. We had this come without any understanding of any of the information. Your packet has a little more information. I think you have a person doing this, the consultant, that would give a lot more information. Steve's data was great, and that'd be good information to have at those conversations. Do what we're doing with the ordinances that have been enacted. Let's find out what the effectiveness. Let's see if they're working. the hotline has been mentioned by several people, and we're still a little short of that, but we're getting there. And then just be consistent and clear. It's on what you do. But I wanted to share two good stories from this last weekend. Came into town, met some new people in town, and they just love our stores. They were from another West Michigan beach town. They were like, why can't our city be like this? And there's things that we have will be affected by these caps. And that's something that they were shocked that there was even discussions of that. They were short-term rental visitors. And even the ones that are in that day trip radius stay in town, because those are the ones that really spend the money in town and pay for things. And we have going to have economic impacts with all the infrastructure and the things that have been talked about in your budgets. So those things should be considered. So that's enjoy 4th of July, celebrate our freedoms, property rights, and all the things that we're celebrating this week.
Thank you, CJ.
Thanks, CJ. Anyone else in the audience?
Maybe it's time for me to get up. I think you all know me, Jane Underwood, 130 Perryman Street. And first of all, I would like to say this is American government in action. I taught United States history, American government, and this is what we want to see. People discussing issues in a nice way, no foul language, which I heard here recently. I had to correct that person. She didn't like it. You know, I've been around here an awfully long time, longer than anyone else in this room. I don't see anyone that I recognize. And the doom and gloom I'm hearing about Saugatuck, you know what? It ain't gonna happen. It hasn't happened in the last 70 plus years that I've been around here. The stores are doing well, the restaurants are doing well. Property values have gone up. I wanted to buy some rental property, not short-term, year-round. Many years ago, my father said, oh, the prices are going to go down. They didn't. Me bad. You know what? I read all the letters that came through here. And what about the people who live here? If you were between or on a street with a number of short-term rentals and you wanted to sell your house, and the person who was interested didn't like the idea of a bunch of short-term rentals around, they can be noisy, we know that. What about those people? You know, this works both ways, folks. And you know what? I'm thinking that short-term rentals, they really became popular during COVID. People wanted to be safe in a house with their family or close friends who they could trust. And I'm kind of thinking with the US travel and international travel, the short-term rentals are probably going to kind of decrease. They really increase quickly. It might take a little longer for them to decrease. And the people that are making money off of them now, you might want to look at something else, you know, NASDAQ or whatever else. So how am I doing time-wise? 37, 36. Saugatuck will thrive. It has for over, what, 150 years? And hopefully we can get this settled and get some kind of resolution to this problem, because I'm tired of coming to meetings. I've been doing this for over 2 years. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. Thanks, Jane.
Anyone else in the audience?
Hi, my name is Gary Kemp. I live at 1022 Holland Street. We've lived here in Saugatuck for 20 years. We've lived in the area since 1970. In fact, we lived out here in 1970. And contrary to what Jane says, I used to come downtown in 1970 to eat or do whatever. There wasn't much of a town here, and it was a pretty dead place most of the time. And in fact, it had a bad reputation. People in Holland weren't allowed to go there or visit there because of that. Well, it's a pretty different and vibrant community today. I just wanted to say a couple of things. One, we bought a bed and breakfast here. We've owned a couple of rentals here. We now own just 2 rentals that we manage. And those were bought as investments for my retirement, for our income stream in retirement. And my wife was in the real estate business. And there's a lot of people, everybody we talk to at our B&B or that comes to town wants to look at real estate. They want to move to the area. They want to move to the area because it's vibrant and it's exciting and it's fun. And they want to look at long-term investments. So they buy something, they start improving it out of the money they get, they pay the taxes, whatever, and ultimately they'll come here or they'll sell it to somebody else who's got the same thing in mind. So I'm very pro short-term rentals. I want the city council to reject this 20% cap motion, and I wanted to revisit it and especially look at all those things that come into play. I think it should be, first of all, we've got to put in place all the rules and regulations. We haven't even implemented any of them that I'm aware of, and I'm in this business. We need to do a detailed financial and social impact and to look at the things that people were saying about how it affects your particular area. I live on the street in Holland Street, down at the end of Holland Street, towards the city limits. I counted, we have 18 residents basically from about where Mr. Miller lives and on down the street to the city limits. There are 7 rentals. They're all on the other side of the street. I've lived there for, like I said, 20 years practically. I don't have any problems with any of the people. They're not out of bounds. Most of those rentals are all on the other side of the street from the rentals that are on the river where I live and where the construction's been going on. So that you need to look at that kind of thing. But I can tell you, it's going to reduce, if we do this, it is going to reduce our market values. It is going to reduce tax revenues to the city. It is going to have financial impacts, but it's also going to have a lot of social impacts over time. And I think it will make this a less fun place to come visit, and you will dramatically affect tourism over time. And I don't want to see that happen. So please vote this down.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
Hello. Lisa Mize, Executive Director of the Saugatuck Douglas Area Convention and Visitors Bureau. As the Planning Commission revisits the topic of short-term rental caps, it's critical to keep in mind the vital impact tourism and short-term rentals have on Saugatuck and the surrounding area's economy. Quite simply, capping STRs would take funds away from marketing the area as a phenomenal travel destination at a time when competition for the tourist dollar has never been more intense. It could also send a message, exponentially amplified across press and social media, that Saugatuck is no longer nearly as welcoming to tourists as we purport it to be. And in fact, the community is taking steps to curtail the number of visitors who come to town. For those who are unfamiliar, the Saugatuck Douglas Area Convention and Visitors Bureau, our primary purpose is to promote tourism for our beautiful area and to advocate for sensible, sustainable development on behalf of our lodging members and related businesses that cater to tourists and locals alike. Think restaurants, wineries, retailers, galleries, live entertainment, and so much more. Since our formation in 1988, as a result of the state of Michigan's Convention on Tourism Marketing Act, we and other CVBs across the state have collected a lodging tax we use to promote the area. As CVB members, local property management companies like Mill Pond, Bella Vita, Relax Rentals, Jakeway, Vacasa, they all pay the 5% assessment to support our marketing initiatives. As such, they play a big part in the tourist decision to vacation here. In fact, short-term rentals make up approximately 45% of all the assessment revenue that we use to promote the area. If short-term rentals in each R1 zone are eventually decreased by 20%, it follows that some of those dwellings that are currently managed by vacation property management companies would be impacted, and CVB revenues would decrease accordingly. Our CVB board has a fiduciary responsibility to protect our mission to build tourism by promoting area businesses and activities that make this such a special place to visit, and which are heavily dependent upon tourist dollars to survive. Since tourism is the primary driver of our local economy, it simply would not be prudent to limit this funding source. Instead, we stand squarely behind those property management companies who are working hard to ensure their guests are compliant with the new regulations the city recently passed. Also concerning to us is the reputational blow the area would suffer should short-term rental caps be instituted. The negative buzz resulting from even the possibility of instituting such a cap has in fact already begun.
The CVB has worked too hard and invested too much to build the area's reputation as a world-class tourist destination to potentially endanger the brand in this way. Instead of caps, we should collectively focus on reinforcing our reputation as a world-class destination, where tourists are indeed welcome, while emphasizing the vital importance of enforcing compliance with the new short-term rental regulations the city passed a few months ago. Doing so would better protect our collective livelihoods, property values, and standard of living. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for being here and for allowing us to talk. My name is Lisa Freeman. I'm a business owner at 132 Mason, and I'm also a part-time resident. I want to start by saying I'm not in support of the cap at all. I vehemently think it's just I think it's a joke, but that's not a nice thing to say. So in a professional way, I'm going to say it's reckless. I mean, it's reckless. Everything that I've read and I've seen, and maybe it's not all accurate, I don't know, but it appears that there are specifically 2 people on the Planning Commission who support this cap, and I don't think their agenda is what it needs to be for this to pass, at least not right now. The first gentleman who got up, I don't recall his name, but one of the phrases he used was, there needs to be a balance to the mix. This is not a balance. This is a decision that almost feels like it's, to me anyway, as a resident and a business owner, like a knee-jerk reactive political mess. And I think I empathize with the people on the Hill and the people who are homeowners here who are struggling with the short-term rentals. I get it. I think there's a solution. I think we have to work toward it. I think we have to let the restrictions that were put in place only just a couple months ago, we have to see if they're successful. We need to do more studies. What's going to happen to the homeowners who can no longer have rentals or who sell their homes, the property value loss, all of the things that everyone has brought up today are all really, really good points to consider. So I'm not suggesting that there isn't something down the road and that we don't work together as a community to not only support the businesses, whether they're vacation rentals or their restaurants or their retail stores. You know, there is a balance to the mix. We just got to take a little time to find it. We need to do a few more studies. We need to know how this is going to impact us. We need to understand the grandfather clause. It's gray. I mean, no one knows where they stand. And it's not fair to current homeowners, businesses, anyone in this community to throw something at us that doesn't have clear and concise direction. And that's what this cap is. It's reckless. So I am not in support of the cap. I would encourage a vote of no. I would appreciate a vote of no. As a 21-year resident and business owner of this community, we need more time. We need more time to understand how it's going to impact us. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Sherry Tidaldi, resident of Saugatuck on North Street. You know, I've spoken before you more than once, but I feel that some people it's fallen on deaf ears, and that's unfortunate. You have not had an economic impact study, but we've got a lot of super smart people in this area. And I started an economic impact study. And I have some numbers, which I hope to have turned in on Friday, so you can get a good idea of what this is really going to do. I'm not smart enough to figure out, I can figure out the first layer of what tourists spend here from short-term rentals, but the economic impact after that dollar is spent, I don't know how to place it to a bank or an insurance company or other people who benefit, or the server who made $200 at the Butler and paid her rent with that. I don't know how to do that, but I can give you all a very good example of the amount of money that we'd be losing or that we have with short-term rentals. You know, and the fact that you're talking about taking away someone's property rights because people are, they say it's too loud, they don't like living next to a short-term rental. Well, what if there's a second home and the second homeowner comes from Chicago and they bring 15 of their friends? There's no limit on a second home, and they party and it disturbs neighbors. That happens. You have a remedy. You had a short-term rental task force. I have no clue why you're not listening to their recommendations. You have a responsibility to all of us in this community to do what's best for this town. Putting a cap on, as you have, is not what's best for this town. It's going to hurt tourism. You heard Lisa talk about the loss to the CVB. What about the loss to the schools? Do you not care about our students? There are 18 mills of every property that is not a personal residence that goes to the schools. You're jeopardizing the schools as well. Have you thought about that? We need to think about the effects of what you're talking about doing. It's not a personal choice. It's about our community and our community thriving.
Thanks, Sherry.
Thanks, Sherry. Anyone else in the audience?
Oh, 449 Water Street and 121 Mary Street. I do believe that the short-term rentals saved my business during COVID, or else I would not be standing here. A lot of people found out about our city during that time. A lot of our people fell in love with our city at that time. And I would continue to love to host those people that use those short-term rentals to keep falling in love with our city. I mean, we did just build a beautiful playground that so many families are enjoying, and they can't rave enough about it. And those people with their 10 people in their families, and they can't hit the beach quite yet because it's still a little chilly in the morning. Those are the people that I serve them breakfast, or maybe they'll come back the next night, like tonight for Music in the Park. They'll come back tonight and also be a part of that. So I don't know what the answer is. I just don't think putting that very restricted cap on it is something that can be doable. I also think that to try to work on something in the midst of June, July, and August, and I know business and life cannot stop at that time, but it's very hard if you're working in this community on any level to stop what you're doing, working on this, because it does take away from your business. So I think there needs to be a pause put on this so everyone might be able to focus on the playground and what the future holds, and what the business holds and things like that, and make the money when they can, instead of everyone being at each other's throat. Like, if I have to hear about this being talked about at the bar one more time, I want to murder someone. I mean, I want people to talk about, oh, did you see what they did? The chain ferry looks so great today. Or did you go to the beach today? Like, that's what summer should be about. I always understand the nitty-gritty's got to happen, but it's just kind of taking away of the vibe of the city currently. Everyone is very angry, and I feel like this isn't an issue that should be very angry about. I feel like there's a way to have an open discussion better, or whatever, on how to make it happen better, but a pause on it might be the way to go, just to get through the month of July and August in a happier, friendlier, because I listened to like a local tell a tourist how horrible it is here because the short-term rentals is what's happening. Like, I hear that a lot, so then they're like, oh, well, maybe I'll hit South Haven or Grand Haven next time. So like, I know it's going to be negative impacts on everything, and I'm not saying you can put everything on a bow and everyone likes the color of the bow and all of that stuff, but I just don't know now is the time. So thank you.
It's Christine.
Kevin Tringali, 119 Butler Street. I'll keep it quick. I don't
have a lot of great notes, but I appreciate everybody that's here. I was a member of that task force committee, and like a few of us said, give it an opportunity to work. I mean, we put a lot of time into this, and we identified what the pains are in this community, and it's been so new. We're in year one. You know, at the end of the day, there's some really good property management companies in this town. There's some really good solo management companies in this town that go through training, certifications. They're national board members on learning the trends on how to be a good manager, how to respect the neighborhood, the properties in, and so forth. So let it work. And again, like I said in the task force committee, at the end of the day, if we have, what do I want to say, consequences to actions, let's try to enforce things and not just slap things on the wrist. And maybe that'll make those people who are having issues with their neighbors a little less of an issue. But we need to have consequences. But that's part of what the task force encouraged to do, and let it work before we do that. I mean, as we walk all out of here today, the week of 4th of July, you're basically saying 3 out of every 4 people you're going to see as you go to your car, you don't want them here. You don't want them here. And I bet you there's a good chance that most people in this room were once a tourist. Give them an opportunity. Give the task force an opportunity to do its work, and then we can talk about something a little more drastic. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Jennifer Reese, 245 Spear Street. I'm going to go a little bit beyond the numbers here. I want to bring up something that Tim Straker started. He said there's a conversation to have around the edges. I'll leave the numbers to other folks, but I can say that the 20% seems rather arbitrary beyond the fact it takes random assigned zones to about 0. I stood up at the town hall when the short-term task force was doing their town hall. And in hearing these conversations today and those over the last year or so, I can't shake something I heard at that meeting. And that was, if someone stood up and said, if you have to augment your income by renting your house, you don't belong here. Followed by the comment, I want to look out the window and see people I know. This wasn't a random person. It was and is someone on the Park and Public Works Commission. So beyond a massive hint of xenophobia, the gall of elitism and ivory tower positioning on what is most people's largest asset, their home, is incredibly hard to swallow and makes me think we are not as inclusive as we purport to be. Most people need the comfort of flexibility on their home in an unexpected downturn. If the real issue is quality of life, take time and measure the regulations or other issues mentioned. Like neighbors, the city has no responsibility to ensure that you know your neighbors. Their job is safety and infrastructure. Volunteering, another side issue. The imagination that the STR cap would bring more people to town and increase the talent pool, it's just a false starter. That's not what it is. Again, in Ivory Tower, the ability to volunteer is the luxury of time. Most people don't have the time to volunteer, or they're volunteering in places you don't see them. As leaders, and you are of the city, I expect you to have an elevated ability to shift perspectives that allows you to listen to other voices and make considered decisions to reject the cap. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Anyone else in the audience?
Hi, my name's Tammy Kerr. I'm a real estate agent in Saugatuck, and I own several homes in the area, 584, 748, Holland Street. I came to this town a long time ago. I grew up in Holland, worked downtown. I've seen it go up, down. I've seen the prices go up and down. But what I don't want to see is I don't want to see myself lose value in my homes down here that I've put a lot of money into to bring this town up to a better scale. Back in the day, I drove around. it was a rundown place. There were a lot of homes that needed work. I'm so thankful that our town looks the way it does today. I'm super thankful that I live here. I'm super thankful that I work here. But I can tell you right now, if I had to move into my house down here because it couldn't be a rental and rent my house out in the township instead, you're not going to like me as a neighbor because I have 7 children. We are loud. We have parties all the time. I entertain, and that's why I live in the township. I can't have neighbors. I don't want neighbors, and neighbors don't want me. So you also have to look at what you're going to get as far as a person that actually lives here. And if a person's bringing their brood of children here, I don't know. I'm telling you right now, you don't want my kids, but I don't even want them. But they're here to stay, and they're 30 and 28 and 26 and 18, and they're all moving back home. And I might just have to move them into those houses, and good luck with that. But I am not for the caps. I think there's a better way to do it. I think we just need to stick to some of the rules that we put in place, see how that works. And I would like to know, because the season has already started, how many people have called in? How many people are complaining to date? It's just a number. I want to know it. So if you guys could let us know, that'd be great. Thanks.
Thanks, Tam. Anyone else in the room?
Mark Klungel, 747 Water Street. Well, I am against the caps overall. Really back a little over a year ago, this council passed a resolution to form an STR task force. That task force was just about wrapping up about a year ago. The task force, among many things, did a survey on the Saugatuck residents. Who was included in that survey? Our current mayor stated that all the property owners would participate in the survey. Our current city manager sent that survey to all the residents and the property owners in this town. Who responded? Both full-time and part-time residents, about an equal number of each, even though this town has larger part-time residents than full-time residents. This town has 30% homestead, which gives you an idea that 30% of the people, the residents, can vote, but participate. All of these people were asked the question, do you want caps? Now, I hear a portion of this all the time, but when all of them were asked, both the part-time residents, full-time residents, 60% said no to caps. In a democracy, usually the majority rules. It's generally the American way. Going against that, the flow of the people really doesn't fly well. I listened to what's said throughout all these meetings, and I thought that was the end of it. Then we started saying, and I listened to the last planning session, and the focus has always been on residents versus part-time residents. And at the last planning mission, one of the commissioners said that part-time residents don't count. They pay 40% more taxes. They support our schools. They own the property. They should count. They should count equally. But when you look, the focus is to go to just the full-time residents so that they can say the majority, a slight majority, voted yes to caps. But when you combine them all, it was 60% against caps. And the focus keeps going back to, oh, we want to take this little segment of our population and say they favored caps. It's not true. When you take all of the population, it was 60% against caps. Now, why do we say the part-time residents have no voice? They pay 40% more in taxes, which support our schools, and they should have a voice in this process. The survey clearly told us that the majority of the residents do not want caps. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Anyone else in the room? Go ahead. Go ahead, Laura.
Laura Durham, 747 Water Street. I can't even understand how we're here today without an economic study. I mean, how could you even vote when you don't even know the impact? So I'm here for no caps.
Thanks, Lauren.
Laura.
Thanks, Laura.
All right, anyone else?
Jennifer Davenport, 607 Butler Street. I'm against the caps. I'd like to submit a letter. I didn't get it in time to get it in your packet, but I'm surrounded by short-term rentals. Some of my neighbors are here. They're here every month. It's their second home. So it's not just Airbnbs and poorly managed properties. They have a manager. I've never had an issue. I have one behind me. I've never had an issue. We live in a tourist town. If you don't want to live in a tourist town, you shouldn't live here. That's all I have. Thanks.
Okay, Jen. Anyone else? Anyone else in the room? I'm going to go online if there's no one else. Okay, anyone online have their hand raised? Would like to speak? I see Richard, Dick Waskin. Go ahead, Dick. You just have to unmute yourself. We'll wait.
There we go.
There it is.
Okay, thank you. I'm blown away by some of the very articulate comments that have been made tonight and the statistics that have been just gleaned from people in the general public. And I think as elected officials, one of your first tasks is that you are to be looking out for the safety and welfare of the entire community of the city of Saugatuck. The welfare of the community also includes the economic welfare of the community. I think Steve Manns makes an excellent point, and I pray that you will listen to the things that he has said. But I'm going to just speak a little bit more about what my expertise is. I'm the broker owner of RE/MAX Saugatuck Douglas. I've owned that. I've been doing real estate here for over 38 years. I went to almost every meeting but one of the task force, and I tried to talk a little bit about what values were in people's homes and why it made a difference in people's values on the Hill versus somebody's value, let's say in the city of Zeeland. And I provided MLS statistics showing that comparable homes here are selling for maybe 30 to 40% more than they would be in a town that's more like just a bedroom community. We are a tourist town. It's those tourist dollars that drove our prices on the Hill to where they are today. Many of those people who own homes there, we know, are short-term rentals. If we put a cap on this, basically you're saying now the value of that home is going to be probably driven to about 30%, 35% less than what it is. And I'm not saying that's just affecting the short-term rental owners. It's affecting every home owner. And I hope the residences that are listening to this, because our community, over 70% of the community is 50 years or older. These are people who are going to be retiring. They're going to be counting on the value of their home and what they can use in their retirement, whether they go into some kind of assisted living or they're just going to a place where they're downsizing. They're counting on that as part of their nest eggs in their retirement. You are basically going to, if you put this cap on, you are driving down their nest egg by about 30%. So I really believe you have to put aside some of your personal beliefs. If you're having trouble with your neighborhood or whatever, you as a commissioner have to rise above that and look at the community as a whole. And that includes the businesses, that includes short-term rentals, that includes second homeowners, that includes the tourists who visit here. Your responsibility is to look out for all their interests. And I hope you do. Thank you.
Thanks, Dick.
Thanks, Dick. Anyone else online wish to speak? Feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to speak if you are online. You see anybody, Jamie? Okay. All right, we will close that at this point unless somebody pops in at the last second here. Okay, we will move on to discussion items. Item 6A, this is an ordinance amending the water regulations and also approving a change in the city's schedule of fees to establish a water capital improvement charge. It is on page 2 of the packet. Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. This is an agenda item that you've discussed a number of times in various ways. So as you recall, back at last fall, well, even before that, a few years ago, Eagle, the state's Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy Department essentially indicated that the city needed to develop a asset management plan for its local water infrastructure, the infrastructure that the city specifically owns, such as our water mains and maybe I give a second for folks.
Yeah, if anybody else wants to clear out, we'll continue the discussion if we could. It just gets a little noisy with our old chairs and our creaky floor.
Yep. So.
All right.
So the city, took on that work and certainly complied with, Eagle's request to develop that asset management plan. And so the city council approved that asset management plan back in the fall. And as part of that, the recommendations involved hiring a rate consultant to kind of take a look at, hey, what are our infrastructure needs? What are the costs over the next several years? And, what are we going to need to pay for these needs that we have? And so Baker Tilly worked with Douglas, worked with the township, worked with the city, made individual recommendations to each of our municipalities, and ultimately recommended a couple different scenarios for the city of Saugatuck. Both involved pretty significant charge that should be added on to customers' water bills to pay for our immediate infrastructure needs over the next 4 to 5 years that we do not have a current dedicated funding source for. And so their recommendation involved either a $20 or $23 per month meter equivalent charge for each user of the water system. So 84% of the customers in the city actually have a meter equivalent of a 5/8 meter, which is considered 1 meter equivalent. So if you were to implement the Baker Tilly recommendation, each of them would be paying $20 per month towards replacing water mains and lead service lines and other local infrastructure that the city is responsible to replace here in the near future. You discussed that recommendation at your last, your workshop on June 5th. The direction at the time was to have staff and legal counsel work on preparing the necessary documents to implement this charge. So before you this afternoon is a copy of the ordinance that would be necessary to implement this charge, as well as a resolution that would ultimately add it to your fee schedule. So I'll leave it there from a high level overview. Happy to dive into any details that you have. I don't have the rate consultant here today because he was at your last meeting and answered some questions that you have, but he will be at your meeting on Monday for any additional questions that we're unable to answer today.
I know we've gone over this quite a few times, but does anyone have any other questions about it or discussion?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, thank you. Good afternoon. Did you know you're going to be here to talk about water rates? I'll just add that. I just want to make sure we clarify that this fee, if implemented, will be dedicated to water and sewer infrastructure only, not to roads and other areas of infrastructure we responsibility for. And I do want to emphasize for those that may have not been listening to this study is that other communities in the state of Michigan have instituted similar fees to put money into the bank, essentially to take care of the infrastructure that we have to repair coming up in the future. And as much as I'm, I don't like an additional $20 fee, I fall into that 84.5%. I think it's a worthwhile investment for me personally, for my property, to be able to contribute to the work that the city will have to perform going forward. So anyway, and Baker Tilly, the firm that we hired, is a nationally known firm. I've had several people that live in the community that work for large firms in the country, and they applauded the city on the hiring of this firm to do the work. So well respected.
Okay. Anyone else? Yeah, I mean, for those who don't know, Douglas and the township have already implemented this fee. We're late in the game as far as collecting money for this, and we need to start paying for it somehow. So.
Yeah, we have what's the deadline is 2040 to almost is it 2040?
Yeah, 2040 for all the lead service lines. Yep.
Yeah, I know a lot of major cities are already doing work like Holland. Lots of my friends that live in Holland, and you'll notice a lot of these cities are already getting busy.
It's mandated by the state, and it's just time for us to take care of it. Yeah.
And again, I hate charging our taxpayers any money for anything, but this is something that is really needed. I think most people that fall under the $20 per month, I think they should understand if they drive up and down the hill and they drive all around this town, it's really time for these roads to get done. And
this is water.
I'll be voting yes on this.
It's just the water, though, not the roads.
Well, the water. I'm water. Sorry about that. But that's the benefit of all of this, is that we'll have resurfacing in our roads as well. So,
okay. Anyone else? All right. We'll move on to the next discussion item, item 6B, the Planning Commission's recommendation for caps on short-term rentals in the R1 residential districts only. And Ryan, if you want to start with this, it's on page 44 of your packet.
Yes, certainly, Madam Mayor. I know there has been a few questions that have come up maybe before we dive into the next piece, as far as some folks have raised some questions about potential conflicts, and our city attorney has done some work on that. Maybe you could just provide a quick high-level overview of the work that he's done on that.
Yeah, certainly. So without getting into any unnecessary specifics, we were asked to look into a few things regarding conflicts of interests. We identified one potential conflict as defined by the city code, which applies to a pecuniary or financial interest. And that was a pending application for an STR license that was submitted by Councilmember White. And my understanding is that that conflict has been removed because the application has been withdrawn. Can you confirm that's correct?
Correct.
And then, yeah, so long as Councilmember White is otherwise able to act impartially and in the best interest of the city, our conclusion is there's no disqualifying conflicts of interest based on the information available to us.
Okay.
Certainly, if any other council member feels that they might have a conflict of interest that would prevent them from acting in the best interest of the city, I would strongly encourage you to disclose that, but that's our conclusion.
Okay. Thanks, Jake. And thanks, Logan. Appreciate it. Yeah. Okay. All right. So that means you can be a part of the discussion.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Logan. All right. Anything else, Ryan, that you wanted to talk about as far as specifics about the recommendation from the Planning Commission?
So I'll just give you just a very brief summary. I trust all of you have been very engaged in this issue. You've read your packet, you've read the memo that's been prepared, you review the data that's in your packet. So, essentially, the Planning Commission has made a recommendation to the City Council that you adopt a 20% cap on short-term rental licenses in the R1 residential districts. That there be a provision that existing short-term rental licenses be grandfathered until they're sold or otherwise there's an ownership change, and that there be a provision for full-time residents with a principal residence exemption to be allowed to short-term rent their home for up to 3 weeks per year. So this is kind of a conceptual recommendation at this point. There's not been any ordinance language that's been drafted or voted upon at this point. They're essentially kind of moving this forward to the council to see if there's any interest in really going further and spending more time and resources on this. You kind of have a few different options. At this point, you certainly can adopt the Planning Commission recommendation and ask staff to move forward with developing the necessary ordinance language to put in place some sort of cap that can take a variety of forms. And we've kind of raised some things for you to consider along those lines. We believe from a staff perspective that if you do want to implement a cap, that it should be in the form of both a police powers ordinance and a amendment to your zoning ordinance. Most of the detail would probably be in your police powers ordinance and some sort of policy that's developed by the council, but that there would be at least some text amendment in your zoning ordinance that would involve a public hearing before the planning commission and some reference to a cap on short-term rental licenses. So that's something that you can wrestle with if you have an interest in moving forward in that way. You could outright reject the planning commission recommendation. It's a recommendation. It's not binding. If that's not something that you as our policymakers want to take up at this time, that's certainly an option that you have. Or you have a third option. You could make an ask to the planning commission to conduct further work, further specific research. You should probably maybe indicate if you have that desire, give them some certain direction on what you'd like them to dive into, but that's an option that you have as well, as to ask your planning commission to spend some more time looking at certain elements. So I think I'll leave it there. I can get into a lot more nitty-gritty detail. Our legal counsel's here to help you. David Jurasik, our consulting planner, is online to help us today as well. So.
Okay. So obviously we've been talking about this for a really long time. This discussion continues to take shape, like as Christine said, at the bar and everywhere else in our neighborhoods. It's been a conversation that we've absolutely been having for a long time. I was a part of the short-term rental task force, so I spent my entire summer talking about it last summer. So that being said, there is a recommendation from our planning commission because our task force was not able to come up with a consensus on whether we should have the caps. So we did ask the planning commission to look at it more closely. We did have our consultant look through it, get more data, narrow it down to exactly what we were looking at. And that's why the planning commission at this time was able to make a recommendation after studying it for some time. So we are to the point where it makes sense that a recommendation is now coming from the planning commission. That being said, we do have a recommendation, and I would love to hear everyone's discussion items as far as what the planning commission has recommended.
Ask a quick question.
Yeah.
Brian, do you, or is Dave still on the call? Can we show the map that we had at planning that has the little yellow, I think they were green or green squares, yellow, green, that shows the, shows where short-term rental licenses are today?
Yeah, so,
So that one doesn't have the borders on it.
So the borders here are kind of replaced with the black crossed lines. So it's just in a little bit, it's just, the map's been cleaned up a little bit. The last map for the planning commission, it had kind of handwritten numbers on there. So this was just a cleaned up version to try to make it a little bit easier for you to see. But same map, essentially. It's based on data from April. So the map's short-term rental information as of April. The chart on the page before this is based on information as of last Friday.
Great.
So,
thanks.
Yep.
Okay, anyone else wish to begin?
Yeah, so we've heard a lot from people have strong passions, and I think, I guess one point I want to make is sort of personal agendas versus, our agendas as council people. I mean, people have, my personal agenda actually is more around, spending time with my friends and family and walking my dog. But when I ran for office, I did actually have a platform I was running for, and short-term rental caps was one of them. And I respect that people feel differently. And, I love that that we all love Saugatuck and can bring that to our work. The other thing I just want to quickly address before I get in is the term opinion-based decisions have been thrown around a lot. So I'm going to be really careful as I go through some of my points to talk about facts, because we do need to make decisions based on facts. So my elevator pitch, the first fact is a significant majority of residents, and that is full-time residents, people who vote for us, want caps. It's 60% overall. It's 67% on the Hill and 70% west on the peninsula. And a majority support a 20% cap. So that 20% isn't just some random number. It actually is based in data from last summer's short-term rental survey. Another fact, a 20% R1 cap will simply get us back to 2022 citywide levels. So we're really talking about, I mean, people, oh, it's so many. We're going back 2 years. So this is not, you know, this is not a draconian change. It takes us back to 2022. Another fact, the overarching goal of our master plan is to implement policies and best practices that preserve the existing small town rural character of the area that achieve sustainable development. And another fact is that caps have been successfully implemented in other Michigan tourist communities, beach communities, with no impact on tourism or on home values. It's a fact. So, you know, we are here to serve Saugatuck residents, and they want caps. Short-term rentals are an important part of our lodging mix. I think we all know that. I mean, I stay in them. I think all of us probably have stayed in them. And we aren't talking about, I mean, what we're talking about is going back 2 years worth of short-term rentals. And our economy was doing pretty well in 2022. I was here. It's not like we are taking away, you know, something that wasn't working well a very short time ago. Citywide, it is, you know, it is a reduction. We'll be down, we will be down to 221 permits from 279. And as Steve Mans pointed out, that is a 58, I think, number in terms of licenses. But again, 2 years ago. Now is for Mr. Williams, the denominator for citywide permits is we have 2 options for that. One is 916, which is the housing units from U.S. Census. And if a resident did a hand count of all of the parcels and looked at Google Maps, looked at Allegan GIS, and you know, Mr. Jurassic or Ryan Cummins can weigh in on, it is not a simple thing to do to calculate this. But when we use those 2 as denominators, citywide with the 916 denominator, today we're at 30%. With the higher denominator, we're at 29% citywide. Under the 20% cap, we'd be at 24% or 23%. That's a pretty healthy number of short-term rentals citywide. Another fact is that over the past 7 years, and I think Mr. Straker or somebody mentioned this, the past 7 years, the number of short-term rentals has increased 168%. That is an explosion of permits, and it has fundamentally undermined our rural small town character. It's not sustainable. The people talk about letting the ordinances we pass take effect, and those are great ordinances, and we are letting them take effect, but they don't address density. I mean, caps are the only way to address density. And, you know, 37% of the homes on the Hill, I mean, that's a lot. It's crazy. To the point of caps have been successfully implemented in other Lake Michigan communities with no negative impact on tourism or home values. Again, these are facts. Sutton's Bay, which has granted smaller, but only a couple hundred smaller, their cap is 45. Ours will be 200 and, yeah, 221. Charlevoix, population of 2348, they have 80 short-term rentals. East Bay Township, population 11,005, 145 short-term rentals. Elk Rapids, population 1529, 78 short-term rentals. Harbor Springs, population 1,200, almost 1,300, 61 STRs. So we are still, I mean, we are way above that. That's a fact. Charlevoix implemented their cap in 2019. Their real estate prices have continued to rise every year since then. Daily visitors between 2020 and 2023 increased from 4 million to 5.7 million. The Visitors Bureau, Lisa's counterpart there, told me that the cap on short-term rentals has not impacted people from being able to come here and stay here. You know, I've mentioned some of this. The same is true with East Bay Township. Real estate values up. Sutton's Bay, same thing. They implemented a cap a couple years ago. Same thing. Real estate values stable or up, as I have been ours. So again, the issue really is addressing density, and then a couple more things on the economic study. And I know one of our planning commissioners and some people have cited the South Haven report as something we should do. South Haven released that in February of 2022-3 at the cost of $2,500. A year after they released it, they implemented a 6-month short-term rental license moratorium. That was in February of this year. So yeah, the report was issued in 2023. So they did a moratorium a year later. They just renewed that moratorium. And in describing the moratorium, the city said, called it an emergency. It is, and that it was immediately necessary for the public service, public peace, public health, public safety, and welfare of residents, property owners, and visitors to the city to continue a moratorium on short-term rentals. Again, that's a fact. So they do this economic study, and they, you know, with all of that data they got from it, they had an emergency, a short-term rental emergency, and have continued a moratorium while they study it. So, you know, I'm not quite sure what that study did for them. One thing of note in that report is they concluded they did a review of what other communities are doing and other studies, and noted that few studies conclude that short-term rental growth should be unrestricted, which ours is now. And importantly in that report, they didn't measure the impact of short-term rentals on residents and neighborhoods. And as several have noted, that's more nuanced and harder to measure, but you have to take into account what something does to the people who lived here. So I will wrap up, but I want to just encourage people to look at the density map and talk to the residents on the Hill, in the Maple Street District, and the Peninsula, but especially on the Hill. The people who elected us and who have made it clear to us that they want a 20% cap. It is our job as City Council to address the problem that was created by Saugatuck's inaction, and actually by this City Council's inaction. I mean, I'll give Logan and me a short pass because we've only been on council for less than a year, but everybody else, this council, by not acting, has enabled the number of permits to increase 50%, 50% since 2022. That's crazy. And I think I would say it's irresponsible of us. It is out of control, unplanned growth of commercialization of our city's neighborhoods. The people we represent want change, and it's up to us to deliver it.
All right, Holly, thank you.
Thank you, Holly.
Anyone else?
Yeah, Mayor Stanton. Good afternoon, everybody. I take offense to the comment that was just made about prior councils not taking action. Until you sit at this table and actually have the experience of what's in front of us, there's certain times that certain actions are taken. Short-term rentals were an experience that everybody had with the pandemic. It was something that the council, I was not on council at the time, but council was dealing with having to support businesses, do social districts, expand outdoor dining, several different things. Short-term rentals are not an immediate issue. They've not been here. They've been here for a long, long time. They used to be called vacation rentals. So I take offense when those comments are made. A lot of data. I'm a numbers guy. I work with numbers all day. There's been a lot of great comments made. I appreciate everybody being here, all the letters that were written. I'm not going to go into the numbers, but what I'm going to talk about is my experience as a longtime community member. I was born and raised here, left for 20 years to move to Chicago, came back in 2020 as a result of the pandemic, actually. And during the time that we were away, my home at 245 Spear Street was rented as a short-term rental and a long-term rental. So we took advantage of the options that we had to be able to keep our generational home. I feel very grateful that we were able to do that. That option remains important to me as a property owner, to have that option. And I believe that's important to every other property owner in town. The quality of life that's discussed, and by the way, I want to thank the attorney for the review that was done. My wife and I hold a short-term rental certificate for our ADU at our home, 245 Spear Street. I do appreciate the attorney being asked to do a conflict of interest review. Very pleased that I passed that. And I also will encourage the council, now that we've opened that door, is to begin to really look at ethical issues. There were some things that took place at this council that were ethical issues that were not addressed at the time. And this is a great opening for us to be able to address that going forward. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk about that in the future. So my experience with short-term rentals is we're surrounded by them in my home. We've been surrounded by them for years. Recently, 3 homes, one of which was owned by a gentleman that spoke today, were short-term rentals that are now full-time residents. The reason I make that point is I don't feel my responsibility as a council member is to manage the economy. And Saugatuck will continue to be successful despite my efforts to, change things. My goal is to really try to make this place work without me being too involved with it as a council member. And I really feel that short-term rentals and caps on short-term rentals is not an appropriate approach for the problem. And I'm still questioning what problem is we're trying to solve with this approach. I was actually one of the people on the planning commission at the time that started the idea of a short-term rental task force because of all the concerns I was hearing as a council member and a planning commission member. And it took off from there. I think the short-term rental task force did an excellent job in analyzing the data, talking with people, getting community input. And ultimately, the short-term rental task force really recommended a few things. One was to put in place some regulations and management, town management of the properties that are short-term rentals. That just got underway this spring. As was asked by one person today, we've not seen meaningful data from that yet, just because it's brand new. When I first started hearing about short-term rentals, the problems I heard was trash cans left in the street. That's still happening. I have a property next door that I take their trash cans in on Monday because the trash is collected and there's no one there. Not a big deal. Noise was another one. Parking was another issue that I heard. And mismanagement or no management of the short-term rental properties, no accountability. So the plan that the council put in place, the action it took in response to that task force report, I believe have not really had the impact that we'd like to see yet. We don't really know what impact that's going to be. I think caps are again, still not sure what problem they're trying to solve. I think I don't feel the urgency that maybe some others feel around putting caps in place. I think we need to just let first things first, kind of get some traction, get some data, and also just begin to understand the impact that our fees are going to have. I believe that's probably going to maybe drive down some short-term rentals in the community because it's becoming increasingly expensive to not only purchase a property and rent it, but also to actually pay the fees that are associated with it. I think in many communities around the country, if you start looking at short-term rental articles on your news feed, all of a sudden you start getting all kinds of them, right? And I'm starting to see them from all over the country. In many communities that have instituted short-term rental caps have really not seen the problems that they perceive to have be solved by that. And again, I still question what problem it is we're trying to solve. And the density is one that is brought up. Personally, in my experience in my neighborhood, I don't feel that density. I do want to read from the short-term rental task force a couple of things. Excuse me. One is a key takeaway from the task force. Public engagement, survey and town hall, and public comment during meetings has been centered on ordinance and regulation compliance from patrons and property owners of short-term rentals. A significant consensus has been that existing ordinances and regulations need to be followed excuse me, as it pertains to noise, trash, parking, and occupancy limits of short-term rentals. That's literally just getting underway with the ordinance changes that the council made back in March. Page 11, short-term rental. There's a very large section of that report. If you've not read it, I would suggest you do, because there's a lot of great information in there. And I think it's easy, like any report, you can cherry pick what you need to make your argument. I'm just going to read directly from what I read on the short-term rental cap section. Page 11, summary. When viewed as a whole, a citywide cap policy was not overwhelmingly supported by those who responded. The response data indicates that full-time residents viewed a citywide cap more favorably than those who identified as being part-time residents. That's been discussed today. Public comment has further supported the statement that a citywide cap would potentially have negative impacts, pardon me, on the economic well-being of the city. The public at large has indicated that short-term rentals provide temporary lodging for tourists who further support the local businesses of the area. Therefore, placing a citywide cap on short-term rentals has a potential negative connotation. Page 15, policy number 5. There was 5 policies that the short-term rental task force presented to the community. The 5th one being no action. An alternative to creating a cap on the number of short-term rentals within the city would be to not establish a maximum number. Market data and other housing markers are trending towards a stabilization of the housing stock and a reduction in the number of new short-term certificates. So long as a property owner can comply with the established zoning and fire safety regulations, a certificate would be issued. Additionally, an increase in active enforcement measures that address noise, trash, and parking concerns could be undertaken, which may alleviate some of the adjacent residential concerns. My position as a council member is I do not believe we should take action. We should reject the recommendation. I think there's a lot of unanswered questions. There's data that we do not quite have yet. As a matter of fact, the planning commission, the planning consultant, and the attorney both said there's more data to be collected before a good recommendation can be made on this. So again, I don't feel the urgency around this. Sometimes action and no action is really the best action to take. I really feel we need to have an opportunity to get some of the work that's been done in place, get some data, begin to better understand that. And if down the road we determine there's still a problem to be solved that a cap would solve, I'm willing to have that conversation. I just don't see that today. And again, my quality of life is enhanced by my short-term rentals. I mean, there are people that come to the house next to us that we see on a yearly basis. We say hi. We invite them to our block party. I mean, if you're in a home in a short-term rental in our neighborhood, you're invited to our block party. You're a neighbor. And so my experience with short-term rentals has been positive. There's been times I've had to go over and say, quiet it down, but I've had to do that with people that live there full time too. So, it goes both ways. And I love Saugatuck for all of the different people we have in town. Vacation rentals have always been a part of this community. They attract people to this community, and people that have come here, as been mentioned by several people, now live here full time because of that experience. I do not want to jeopardize that. And I encourage our environment, and I love living here. Love Saugatuck the way it is. And not that we don't have things we can work on to improve, but I don't think short-term CAS is going to improve anything.
Madam Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead.
What I'm going to try hard to do is not repeat anything. We've been batting this issue around for 2 years now. Most of us have heard all the arguments back and forth. I want to direct your attention to one thing that's interesting and new. We've already established that
Saugatuck staff, your microphone has been cut off.
Is anyone else not able to hear or see?
Yeah,
I don't hear either.
We can talk amongst ourselves now.
Yeah, this is not good.
Okay, I didn't know if it was just my connection or because I could see everyone moving, but I've lost the meeting. And was curious if I was the only one. Ay, ay, ay.
They need some elevator music.
We're disconnected from the whole meeting. This is Dawn and Cheryl.
I just sent a message to the city manager. Hopefully they can get us back online.
Yeah, the mayor had some important new things to tell us, and then it got cut off. Imagine that.
I won't say what I want to say.
Hi, Scott and Vicky.
No, the most important part of the meeting. Oh, sorry. I'll put myself on mute.
I know.
Sorry, Ethan.
Has anybody tried to reconnect to the meeting?
They dropped. It's not, they didn't drop us. They fell out of the meeting. So they have to reconnect.
Okay.
We are all in their Zoom meeting. They fell out. So they have to reconnect to the Zoom. And I wonder if they realized that they did that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So I know some of the people, Kevin, Laura, they are all, Melanie, I think you were on the call. Laura Dornam is at that call. I wonder, although I don't know if anybody's really checking their phones there.
Yes, I did message Laura and Mark. I texted both of them, hoping they could let the council know that we've been cut off.
That they were cut off. Yeah, I don't think anybody's checking their cell phones while they are at the meeting. So we might have a hard time. The people on the council, the city clerk, she had her computer. Oh, yep.
They're on, but they're muted.
Laura just said that she told them.
In the meantime, I wish Tammy was it. Somebody should call the press.
Ours is muted. Jamie's working on it. We just need a couple minutes. Okay, can everyone online hear us? Maybe somebody raise your hand. Dave says, okay, all right.
We can hear now.
All right, we will continue. Scott, did you want to just reiterate a few more things in case those online didn't hear what you had to say?
Yeah, I'm in favor of moving the adoption option forward on Monday, and I will vote in favor of it.
Okay. All right. Anyone else?
Lauren, if you don't mind, you cut off right when you said you had. Then you cut off, Lauren, when you said you had new things to add. Could you?
Oh, okay. So at this point, we're just Scott Dean, council member Scott Dean was speaking, and I wanted him to have an opportunity to share what he had to say with those online who might not have heard what he had to say. So Scott, go ahead and just summarize.
Yeah, the option 2 and option 3, in my view, basically only serve to trigger the nuclear option, which is a ballot initiative, which the mayor pro tem already outlined the way that will play out. Basically ties the council's hands for a number of years. So I believe the most responsible thing for us to do, based on what I believe the voters want, is to actively manage this issue. And if there are unintended consequences, we can be much more nimble as a council to make sure that this doesn't have any unintended consequences. Personally, I'm not convinced by the fear mongering and the arguments that the town is going to collapse. Saugatuck has always been a tourist town, will always be a tourist town, regardless of what this council does on this issue. So I have no worries there. But if there are small things that need to be tweaked, absolutely. But once again, if we don't act, it's going to trigger the nuclear option, which is a ballot initiative. So I'll be voting in favor of this on Monday. If the council agrees to move forward with adoption, to put that for a vote on Monday. And once again, if my vote was contrary to the will of the voters, they will tell me in November.
All right.
Sure. First of all, I'd like to say that fear mongering it's a buzzword, and we all like to hear that. I haven't seen a lot of fear mongering other than a little bit from both sides of this coin. We've all got strong opinions, so I don't know if we want to confuse strong opinions as fear mongering. But I haven't seen any bullying with anyone or any kind of activity like that. So I want to thank everybody for a very peaceful meeting. That we've all come together and been able to talk about such a hot topic very peacefully. Your numbers, we talk about what the rentals were 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. I remember when we started having this topic, we were bombarded with all these paperwork all the time, or all of a sudden. And it was due to the fact that there were a lot of rentals up on the hill and around here that weren't registered. Back in 2022, when folks found out that we were starting to have these conversations, everybody ran to the door to rent that. So I'm not so sure, what the numbers exactly were in 2022 of those that we do know what was registered, afterwards. But beforehand, we really didn't have a comprehensive, and I want to thank Brian Cummins for that. He's done a wonderful job of organizing all that data for us. We talk about, and I've heard folks say that, they're worried that, well, maybe we're losing our sense of community. And I lived here for about 20 years. I used to have a business here, but I'm not a property owner, and my income does not depend on the short-term rental industry as well. So I think out of anyone with a conflict of interest, I'd probably be the least with any kind of investment, whether it be a home or a business. But getting back to what I started saying is that we talked about, oh, we're losing our sense of community. Well, I've been here for full-time over 20 years now, and I've seen an increase in our community. I've seen an increase with the CVB, with volunteers and them getting involved in events in town. I've seen an increase in our organizations like the Rotary Club and their involvement in our events here. I've seen an increase in the Women's Club. They have a larger membership than ever. I've also seen an increase in the Saugatuck Douglas Art Club as well. A lot of our residents and our little organizations have really gotten bigger and stronger. So I can't see that. And finally, just finding out, going back and looking at the high school and the junior high in our school numbers, we talk about families. Are we losing families? No, we're not. You might not have the one that lives next door to you that you did before, but our school population has remained the same, if not a little bit more, over the last 20 years. So we're not losing children going to our schools, at least that I know of from the last 20 years of data that I was able to look through. I spoke up at the meeting at the last Planning Commission meeting, and I still stand where that we've created these new ordinances and increased fees. We've addressed parking on the hill, and we should let those things settle before we get too carried away. Maybe caps might be a solution. It might be an answer. But what, again, like Councilman Gardner said, what exactly are we answering here? We talk about, oh, there's too many of them here. Well, why are there, what are the problems? And again, I just can't, again, I don't own property here, but as your councilman, I cannot risk the chance, whether we can speculate that it is, we can speculate that it isn't, but I'm not going to risk the chance of taking 20 to 30% off of your home value. And I'm not also, I just don't feel comfortable doing that. So I really think that economic impact study, just for us, we could say, oh, well, You know, there was that town north of, you know, Charlevoix or these other little towns that might have hotels that certainly aren't the destination location that Saugatuck has become. You know, the Elks Rapids, you know, I don't hear much about that in the newspapers, and or these other little towns that you mentioned. They're not that popular. And I just don't see how we can compare ourselves to anyone else. Don't think that we're better than everyone. I just think that our economic structure here is different, and we owe it to ourselves to take the time to have that economic impact study. I think 20% is a little bit too extreme right now. I think I might have been comfortable with a higher percentage. I don't know right now. I don't think we have enough information here. And then finally, you know, I'm going to agree with what I heard our chair for Planning Commission, Steve Mann, say that, you know, folks should know if they're buying a house here on the hill, they're buying a house here in the town because we are that close to town. And the folks that have vacation here that stay on the hill do most of their shopping and everything else. Another thing that's different than Saugatuck, than even Grand Haven or South Haven, is that we've got a lot of shops here, don't we? A lot of different shops, a lot of different businesses, and such a small area, even more so than Pentwater or a lot of these smaller towns here. So I think that we have a different dynamic here. So, you know, it's good to see what other towns do in that too, but I just think that we're moving too fast to get something done too quick.
Thanks, Gregory. Logan?
Yes. Just a couple of small points. I think I'm going to change anybody's mind, but when I'm here because I love this town. And what I really love about this town, when I look at it, is the small business community. I think that's what I don't view short-term rentals as like a goal to control. I kind of view it as a symptom of success for what we've seen for our town, and that's our small business community. Very familiar with our small business community, as many of us are. And I think if you ask them right now, things are harder than they've ever been. People are having trouble in all sorts of ways with cost issues, and margins are really thin on restaurants. And I've been here a long time, and I remember when there were a lot more empty storefronts than there are right now. And those people live and work here and are a part of our community year round. And Jamie, can you pull up that map of the short-term rentals? When I look at this map, what I see, and you know, there's a bunch of different ways to look at the numbers, and you know, and have them be true. I don't know if any individual statistic has a monopoly on the truth, but when I look at this map, what I see is that we're talking about cutting the short-term rentals in the R1 district by almost half. And that, if you notice, that's the area that people walk to town from. And we don't all agree on short-term rental caps. We all agree that there's not enough parking downtown. And these are the people who can come down here without blowing up our parking scene. And they love coming to our community because they can walk down and visit our incredible, unique small businesses. And I'm worried that if we cut so suddenly, if we take such a sledgehammer to this and we reduce our short-term rentals in the walkable area of our town by half so sudden, or like, I mean, I know that they'll attrition, but I'm worried about the long-term impact because I plan on being here a long time. And I'm also worried that that will send a signal to stop investing in our community because the numbers are only going to go down. And so that's the longer term perspective I think I'm trying to guide myself with on this. And there's just one kind of thing that I usually try to use as a goal, a measuring stick for when I'm thinking about things. And it's when you have some time, when you feel like you're doing well, when you're achieving success, I sort of try to think about things and judge how I interact with people on is my effort working to build a higher fence around my success, or is my effort trying to build a longer table so people can come and enjoy this with me. And I view a drastic cap as building a really tall fence and telling people that we have this and you can't, and we don't want you here, which I think for a town that for hundreds of years has been centered around tourism is a really wild about face that I'm unwilling to make. I don't think that's my role at this table, is to make huge platitudes about this is how life should be here. But I kind of welcome the ballot initiative a little. I know it's a threat. I don't feel like it's my place to make such a huge decision for so many people in this town without them. I would respect that decision. Obviously, it's mandatory. But yeah, I would want to hear from everybody on this. I don't think we should be making this severe of a decision.
Also, just wanted to make the point, not quite, I can't remember how many people did take the survey. I know that got us to the number that 60%, as you were saying. I can't remember how many people exactly, how many residents took that survey, but I do remember one resident at one of the meetings, at one of those meetings, saying that he took that 5 times.
And we found him and took his responses out.
Good, that was good. But that was one that you thought.
But we did, just so you know, we did look at the IP information.
Right. But you could use several computers. I could use a computer at work or one at home. And then also, you know, every time we've had a short-term rental meeting or anything about it, and everyone's been here, I've been keeping a study, you know, how many folks, I keep seeing an overwhelmingly amount of folks, and most of us that spoke up today were residents. Gary Kemp, CJ Badrick, Tim O'Keefe, you know, these are most of the folks that spoke one way or the other were residents here. We had today, out of 22 people that spoke up, we had, and I didn't count the lawyer, and I didn't count, you know, we counted 4 that supported caps, and 5, 10, 15, 16 that were against caps. And so every meeting that we've had that's been STR, it's been almost twice as much, if not more, people that are against caps. So I'm not hearing that as much, that there's more residents that want it, because most of the folks that spoke up here were residents, and at every meeting I've gone to, it's been more folks against caps than for caps.
Well, we'll get the ultimate data point on November 5th. Yeah. And you know, that may be something that folks might not like. You know, they might not like saying, okay, now we're stuck with
that. That would be fine. I would like to see that myself.
Well, we're gonna get it. Yeah. We're gonna get the ultimate data point.
All right, Holly is next.
Yeah, just really quick. I appreciate what you're saying, Gregory, and you're right, but it's not a scientific. I mean, it's not statistically valid. Just 2 other quick points. Just following up on Russ's point about, you know, not wanting to manage our economy, and I agree, but what actually short-term rentals is managing to our land use policy, which is our master plan. Mm-hmm. So that's an important distinction. And then again, to what problem are we trying to solve? It is density, and I'm just going to tease you for saying, you know, in your experience, and we all do have our experiences, and that's great, and that's our opinion, and we are welcome to it, but it doesn't really matter what, you know, you think or what I think or any of us as individuals. It's what our residents, our voters think. And finally, to Logan, our job is to decide tough stuff like this. I mean, I hope we make the decision, because it's our job. So that's it.
All right, just a couple of points I want to make. We are not unique when it comes to talking about short-term rentals. So tourist towns across the country and across the world are talking about short-term rentals because it's changed a lot of what how people travel, where, you know, how they're able to vacation. And they have great options as far as, you know, staying in a home and being able to cook a couple meals in your home and feeling more comfortable, having a backyard fire pit, you know, those types of things. But it's also, you know, put a drain on our communities and not having affordable housing within our communities and people being able to live within those communities as much as they used to. And so we're seeing it across the country. It's happening, I mean, just like San Francisco, Vail, you name any town where they have so many short-term rentals, and now they're dealing with it. There's definitely an issue within those communities, and they are talking about caps, and they are talking about how to deal with this. So we're not unique when it comes to that. The other point I want to make is that this is just looking at our residential areas. We have opportunity for growth in all the other areas. You know, I see Saugatuck in a way where I would love to see a couple of boutique hotels on Blue Star Highway, especially across from the Ivy House. That's a beautiful facility that has weddings constantly, and it would be really nice to have a nice boutique hotel right across the street to hold those large groups. And when we have a bike path that would lead right there, people could ride their bikes into town and enjoy that. I also see things like Coral Gables. That could be a beautiful inn someday if that had places for people to stay, and it could be a beautiful inn right on the water. I was just involved in a PUD meeting that was for the property on Water Street where the old Big Lake Outfitters was. You know, they're talking about adding more short-term rentals right there on the water there. I was just at a ribbon cutting ceremony for the Porches on Mason. They just added a whole bunch of short-term rental lodging opportunities for people to stay there. So what I'm saying is there's opportunities to continue to grow in areas that might not be our quiet residential areas, that might be by the high school, where it would make more sense for maybe a full-time resident or maybe a cottage owner could live. So I'm just saying that there's opportunities for growth still. Where there's areas in our community and in Douglas and in the township that it would make a whole lot of sense to have lodging options, and that maybe we should look at our residential areas for what they are, and they're residential areas. Anybody else?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I just want to, the tri-community plan, which gets mentioned often in conversations, is due for an upgrade or due for an update in 2026 by the township, the Village of Douglas City, and City of Saugatuck. And one of the items that's in the tri-community plan encourages the development and use of short-term rentals to attract people to our community. That will be something that will probably be discussed in terms of what the appropriate language is going to be going forward. Do we still encourage that? And again, it was mentioned by one of the speakers today, any decision we make as a community impacts our neighbors, and conversely, any decisions they make affect us. So again, without some kind of economic impact study, and I love the fact that someone brought up, what's the societal impact on the community of proposed change? Don't know. The economic, I don't know for sure, and I think that's something that definitely needs to be vetted out. Cannot compare us to South Haven or Charlevoix or Grand Haven or Harbor Springs. We're all very different. And without having that data, I am just not comfortable making any decision on that level. And there's a continued comment about community, and I think back to when I grew up here as a kid. You could walk down Butler Street and there's hundreds of motorcycles. It was downright dangerous. I mean, my dad would say, you don't go down there without an adult. I don't recall any prohibition against motorcycles at the time. That changed, that passed. Saugatuck became a very popular community to the extent that, you know, we actually had to shut the town down because people wanted to come here. It just was unsafe. So Saugatuck's been, the point I'm making is Saugatuck can continue to be successful. It's just how it looks and how I want my quality of life to be. And right now, the way the town is situated, is everything perfect? No, but short-term rentals and the density that's being mentioned in my neighborhood is not impactful. As a matter of fact, it's a positive. So, you know, back in the day, people used to wear t-shirts that said, "Where the hell is Saugatuck?" I don't know if everybody's here even remembers that. Dan Decker probably remembers that. We used to wear these shirts. Where the hell is Saugatuck? Laura Dern probably too remembers that. That's a problem that Saugatuck had, is people heard about it, but they didn't know where it was. They heard it was a biker town. The reason I'm mentioning all this is because there's a continuum here. Saugatuck is going to be just continuing to change. It's going to evolve. And again, this is something that I think will just continue to evolve. I'm not for hands-on management of our property values. I'm concerned about our property values as a property owner, and I'm concerned because of our businesses and their property values. But I don't think short-term rentals caps are going to have a positive impact on that. And so anyway, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Now we are on to public comment. Unless you guys have any other questions.
Well, Mayor, I think we owe it to everyone that's here, and I do appreciate everyone here to express their views. I think you've all seen there's a majority of the council that wants to move toward adoption on Monday. So I just don't think there should be any rumors to the contrary. I think we're heading in that direction, are we not?
So, I mean,
go ahead.
From a staff perspective, I mean, just to be clear, I mean, what we would be putting forth Monday would be some, and we can drop a few different, sample motions to essentially direct, if you want to move forward with, caps, consistent or similar to what the Planning Commission recommended, was some language to basically direct staff to move forward with starting to draft that ordinance language. So whatever happens Monday is really just kind of a touch point to give direction to move forward with a specific direction. It's not going to be an ultimate decision until you actually get ordinance language in front of you, both in the form of police powers ordinance, text amendment through the Planning Commission public hearing there that would eventually come back with a recommendation of whether or not to adopt that specific language, and then drafting resolutions to set cap limits, and then policies around this as well. So it's a process. So it's kind of a first touch point to say, should we continue to spend the resources and time to draft those documents? So.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Then can we move on to public comment on anything you'd like to speak on tonight?
Hello, Christine, 449 Water Street, 121 Mary Street. I don't know where to begin regarding the hardscape on Mary Street regarding the pavers. So be careful of what gets questioned and approved here on Wednesdays, because things definitely change by Monday. So I have requested several meetings from that Wednesday until this Wednesday, and I've yet to receive any recitement back besides getting a citation every day as a small business owner. I have about 16 weeks to make my money. When everyone was okay with the pavers on the Wednesday meeting, I had a very small window of time with my landscaper that he was able to put the pavers in. One of those nights that he was putting the pavers in, a city council man came down and took pictures, which to me is harassment. And that is how I feel about my piece of property and every hoop and everything that I have jumped in. And I love this community and the things that I have done for this community, and I will continue to do, and I will continue to fight. The 4 picnic tables over on Mary Street are an integral part of my business plan for summer. It's shaded, it's nice, it's quieter over there, there's no music over there. Families of 10 that are enjoying the beautiful park can sit over there very comfortably. It fits, the pavers fit very well with the handicap spots now, without the mulch that handicapped people are be able to get in and out of their cars now. So now I have to tear up my pavers, or I was threatened that I would lose all of my outdoor seating. So it's very hard to be getting threats or ordinances or whatever we're calling them through email as a business owner, as someone that's very hands-on, that comes to these meetings. Anyone can come talk to me, anyone like that. Was it shame on me that I did it 2 days early without the official approval on Monday? Everyone's got to be very careful. They could say one thing here and do another thing on Monday. So yes, that's shame on me. Shame on me that Wednesday I thought we were all on board with pavers until I did the pavers, and then I was not on board with the pavers. So I guess why I'm standing up here is I would like to grovel, basically, is what I have to do. You have me at a point where that's what I have to do as a small business owner, is grovel. So I need to grovel to figure out what you would like from me to be able to get those pavers down and me to be able to use my picnic tables in the hardscape. And if you don't want this to become a jungle, a concrete jungle, every hard space in town is almost concrete or pavers. And if it does have a little bit of grass, the grass no longer exists there. So I have resubmitted with the pavers, resubmitted with a quote. That happened on June 26th, and I've yet to get a response on where we stand with that. So it's just very, very frustrating being a small business owner trying to get all of these things done.
Christine, thank you.
Thank you, Christine.
Anyone else wish to speak?
A couple of things I didn't have a chance to say earlier with the 3-minute limit. One, I am Steve Manns, 568, and again, a member as well as chair of the Planning Commission. One, I wanted to remind everyone that I can't tell you how thankful I am to all the people in the Planning Commission, as well as the short-term task force that was formed last year. Many people who have attended the meetings probably haven't seen the amount of work and amount of time that has been put in by many of the people in this community, as well as all of you on the council in trying to look at this topic. And so because of that, I am grateful and very proud to be part of it. I will have to say that there was a few people that I had comment to me during the week that I was not supporting the Planning Commission or my role as a chair by going out and expressing the fact that I had voted no and why I voted no and why I thought we should potentially look at, if we are going to put in caps, higher limits. The one thing that I would have to say is that, and I even had someone say that by doing that, I was giving in to business owners, property managers, and investors. To that, I just wanted to say that whether you're an appointed commissioner or you're an elected councilman, I believe that we have a responsibility, as Dick Watson said, to all sectors of the community when we are recommending policy. That's the homeowners, that's the business owners, that's the investors, that's the tourism that drives our revenues in this city. And it's also our convention bureau. So while I'm proud and I definitely always want to represent the recommendations of our Planning Commission, I do believe that each person has the individual ability to talk to anybody in the community about their viewpoints. And I believe that what I was trying to do was not only be supportive, but I was also trying to follow what I think is the true responsibility for all of us. And I would ask that each of you think of that responsibility. If we have the majority, they're going to be looking at caps, go back and take a look at, we didn't have a lot of that data that's now in your kit at our Planning Commission meeting. The 20% that's out there, you have to ask yourself, are you giving in to the 20% because you're afraid of a ballot initiative that just pulled the 20%? There's nothing that says it has to be 20%. It could be 25, it could be 30. All of them will allow you to not issue any new license currently. And then when we do start issuing license, which will have to be discussed whether it's here or in planning, we need to be issuing new licenses based upon density studies, density measures. If an application comes in, does it get approved based upon what else is in the area? Those are things that we can do after we hit the limits. But if we set the limits too low, we may be 20 years before we ever get to that. Keep that in mind, because as Ryan told you, you can approve it, send it back. It doesn't mean you can't change the percentages. So, but again, I am very supportive and thank you all.
Thanks, Steve. I'm sorry. Anyone else wish to speak? Hi,
Yes.
Joe. Oh, wait, 1 second. We still have somebody in the audience that's speaking. I'll get to you in 1 second. Go ahead, Joe. Joe, you can go ahead. Sorry.
All right, Joe Leonardi, 712 Allegan. 2 points. I've had my property 72, 73. So I've seen a complete metamorphosis of what this town was. When Allegan Street was crushed stone, it wasn't even paved. So I've seen a lot of changes here. I have a neighbor sitting in the audience who bought the house next to me. And when he bought it, he added an extra room, he added a bedroom, an extra bath, because it was the idea that he would be able to rent that property. And he's made significant improvements. And now he doesn't rent it anymore. he splits his time here. But he pays an outrageous amount of taxes. Doesn't use the schools, is only here X number of months a year. That's a lot of money for us. And you don't cut people off from being able to do that. And I thought Logan had a great idea about you talking about on the hill. I live on Elegant Street. So I have a screened-in porch and I'll sit there and I'll read or I'll have coffee, whatever I do, smoke a cigar. And I see there's a lot of renters up there. And I see the stream of people. Sometimes you see the same 3 people walk by me 3 times in a day. Breakfast, lunch, they're coming back with shopping bags full of stuff that they bought, and they go down to the dinner. And then they're going to have dinner and they go to the SCA. Be careful when you start limiting these people, because I know just if you do nothing but limit Elegant Street, you would get a hit economically. And so be careful, you know, about what you do. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Anyone else in the room wish to speak? Go ahead.
Gary Kemp at 1022 Holland Street. I spoke before. Just a couple of things struck me interesting listening to the people here. Number one, I hear you saying that voters mean more to you than the whole community does to you. And the whole community is more than just voters. It is the second homeowners who don't get to vote here, who have a financial interest in this town. And the split was 50-50 at least, or actually a little more in favor of not caps by the people who have second homes here. But those people who have second homes here are the ones who are going to come here later and live here. And we just had a good friend of ours. They stayed in our cottage down on Mary Street for about 8 years. And they finally bought a condo here. But they live in Detroit. Now, they're not going to be able to vote here, but they're paying a hell of a lot of taxes on that condo downtown. And they're not wanting to rent it, okay? But it came about because of my short-term rental. I also hear this fear-mongering thing. Well, fear-mongering is a two-edged sword. The other edge of that sword is that there's a hell of a lot of expertise in this town, and people that have been in this town running businesses and been in this town investing their lives and their financial wherewithal to make it everything it is today. And you cannot listen to those people, and you can say you know more because you're smarter than they are, but you better not ignore them, because I think there's a whole lot more experience in what makes a town viable, and it's the financial center of that town that keeps it alive and keeps the businesses developing here. Like I said, I was here in 1970, and this was not a town of much of anything other than ill repute. And it's only been in the last really 20 years since we chose to move here that this town has really taken off. So be real careful, and you really better think about that, because if it were me, I would rather lose the damn vote or this initiative, if that's going to happen, then I would give in to my principles of what I think is making this town successful. And I think most people, if you really take the time to help educate them and let them understand what's making this community what it is, would be against this petition or would vote it down ultimately. Now, that's a risk you take, but I'm willing to take that risk if people really take the time to learn what the real issues are. So I'm 82 years old. So this ultimately, I'll be fine. I mean, I could sell my properties and make a lot of money and all that, but I hate to see this town make a mistake because of short-term interest of a few people.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Jane.
Okay, Jane Underwood, 130 Perryman Street. I've heard about the 70s being a horrible time in Saugatuck. I don't remember that. I remember being up here. I do remember the motorcycles, and boy, they were fun to watch. They were going down Butler Street, but that was more in the 50s. Then we had jazz festivals. And the first one was all right, Russ. As I remember, the second one kind of got out of hand, and they had to, block off north and south exits into Saugatuck. It was kind of exciting. Al McMasters did that.
Yep.
People from Holland not liking Saugatuck, well, I don't know how to phrase this, but there were some people in Holland that didn't like some of the people in Saugatuck. Their lifestyles were not according to, you get my drift, folks? Yeah. But then there were also some people from Holland, former mayor and his wife, because there was no place to drink in Holland, would come down to Saugatuck. And a lot of their friends came down too, because, hey, Holland was dry, not like today. So, you know, sometimes people have a different view of things. As a history teacher, I remember a lot of things. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane.
Okay.
Richard Williams, 241 Culver, 1050 Elizabeth Street. A couple points. It's true what Greg said about compliance. Prior to Ryan coming on board, there were a lot of short-term rentals in town that weren't registered. So the statistics you're referring to they are tainted. There are many short-term rentals in town not registered. So they're more up to speed with compliance now. So we need not to look at those statistics you mentioned as being facts. Another thing is, I want to talk about, briefly about the water that we talked about in the meeting. $50 more per homeowner with a 1-inch meter is what I have. So that's quite a bit of money per year to fund the program that is upon us. But I thought maybe, well, sell the airport land to fund that. So that's a good way to go with the airport land. It's not even contiguous with this city. It's far off over there. We don't have a value on it yet, but get a value, maybe sell it. Another matter is, I take offense to the mayor mentioning that some outside developers are going to come here and make some beautiful boutique hotels on the backs of those on the hill that have the 20% cap. That's not community building. It's great to have those things in addition to the homes on the hill that are for multi-generationals and people with dogs. You know, people come here, mother, grandmother, kids, and a dog. You're taking away the property rights of the people that have that, should they change ownerships. And I guess the last thing is, on Cape Cod, where there are many short-term rentals all over. I'm from Massachusetts and New York. They are letting economics play out, supply and demand. No short-term caps there. No, I mean, short-term rental caps there. Economics will balance out things. So I hope you reconsider your vote or let it go to the voters that two people here, one person in particular, is threatening, especially by her husband's emails to in the packet. It's sort of unseemly. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard.
Anyone else in the room?
I live in the city, 747 Water. This is Mark. The question I have again is, at the last planning meeting, I asked to be able to see the statistics that are always thrown out. I looked at the surveys in depth, and there is no way that the voters vote, you know, those who just vote, the residents that vote, it was at 70%. I mean, if you look at all those categories, it was closer to 50-50 on just about every category as far as pro caps, against caps for the residents. When you looked at just the part-time residents, it was 90% against caps, 10% in favor. So, I mean, when you combine it all, 60% of the residents said no to caps. In response to the growth in vacation rentals and number of surveys, well, we have several houses where it used to be one application. Now there's 3 or 4 applications, and we count them over one property now have 4 applications. So, I mean, you're growing it by changing policy. You're growing it by different methods. And to say that in 22 that we've grown by this amount, it can't be true. Because we are using, because of the policy change, we're now where we used to have one certificate, now we have 4 or 5. So, I mean, that's more money for the city. There's more things to do, but it's not growing exponentially as explained. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Anyone else in the room before I go online? Okay. If the woman that has her hand raised with the black hat.
Hi.
Hi. If you could introduce your first and last name and where you live.
My name is Melissa Friedel. I'm at 535 Spear Street. I live on the hill. And I wasn't going to talk. I've been to quite a few of these meetings, mainly just to get information so that I can have an informed decision or opinion. And I think one of the things that Scott had mentioned was that really wanting to listen to his constituents and being accountable for those people that voted for him. And I just want to make clear that I live on the hill. I've been here for 20 years. There's been a lot of changes. And I would say for the most part, they've been very positive. I think for people that have kind of taken the pathway where they bought a second home, and there's many people like that on the hill, where initially they rented it out before retirement, then they took that money, invested it in the property, made it nicer, and then eventually moved here. You're going to lose that type of future buyer because they're not going to be able to afford it. And that's only elevated the hill. The other thing I want to comment on is, there's this big movement of neighborhoods need neighbors. That was kind of started on my street. And, I think about it and I've never had an issue with a tourist. Never. I think for the most part, they've been very positive exchanges. They bring a lot of energy, excitement. And yes, you see a lot of people walking up and down with shopping bags. But I have had issues with neighbors, big issues on our street. So in some ways, be careful what you wish for, because okay, maybe they're loud for the weekend, you have a tourist, but then they're gone. But if you get a bad neighbor, it can make your life miserable. And I've had neighbors that have lived behind me that would throw parties at 2 a.m. We had a neighbor where we had police officers on our street every other week. And so when you talk about community, I think you have to really kind of look at both sides. For me personally, what I'm most concerned about is what it's going to do to my property value, the tax base, taxes going up now. I guess now there's this new water charge that we're going to have to pay for, but also to have that flexibility and comfort that knowing that if one day I were going to need to rent my house out, even if it was for a short period of time, I would have that option. And so I think for me, the biggest thing is this 20% cap. It seems like someone used the word sledgehammer. It seems like a really low number and maybe something more reasonable. And then also the other thing is, has anybody explored maybe doing like, if you apply, you have to wait a year, like maybe have a waiting period before you could turn turn it into an SDR or short-term rental. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Dick Waskin, you're up next.
Dick Waskin, 6576 Heron Ridge Road, Saugatuck, Michigan. Just a quick comment because I was listening to Russ and Jane talking about the history of the town. The town does change. I don't know if everybody has ever seen the picture that used to be over the entrance of town over on Lake Street that said, "Welcome to Saugatuck, Gentiles only." That was kind of an elitism thing that the town had back then. Then the town changed, and then there was the motorcycle period, and there were the ups and the downs. But now again, I'm starting to see, and I agree with one of the speakers earlier, there's an elitism that's creeping back into the situation that, hey, only the residents count, only the residents we need to listen to. And that's just wrong. That's just totally wrong. And it's not an ethical position to take. But I just wanted to point that out, that where we were once, when we were saying Gentiles only, should not be where we are now. Thank you.
Thanks, Dick.
Anyone else online?
Looks like Catherine's trying to raise her hand.
All right, Catherine, if you can unmute yourself.
Hi. I think you've taken a very unfortunate path this afternoon. What amazes me is that you don't want to get all the information before you're going to vote on something. So you're not totally informed and you don't want to venture into knowing that information. That's unfortunate. We're going to find ourselves again in another lawsuit, costly to the city and unfortunate for everybody. Also, I want to speak to Mayor Stanton's comments about wanting to see a lovely little boutique hotel across from the Ivy. You have a boutique hotel, the Maplewood. You also have the Wickwood. You have the Belvedere. And I'm sure Kathy Wilson would be able to fill the Beachway and winterize it if we had the guests from the Ivy Inn. So before you pop off and say things that insult your constituents, and that was a direct insult to me because I believe I used boutique hotel in my advertising, so I didn't miss that one. Maybe you'd like to get together and visit some of these properties and know what they're about. Maybe you'd like to get together with Lisa Mize and find out what the low occupancy revenue has been for this spring. I can agree with what Mr. White said relative to margins. The breakfast cost, all of those things have drastically increased. So know what you're talking about before you have all these imageries of what we could have. Know that we do have good things here already. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
Catherine.
Anyone else online? All right, we are on to, we have a number of correspondence that you would see in your packet. And now we are on to council comments. Who would like to start? Holly, Logan?
No comment.
Okay.
Well, you know, I'm going to say happy 4th of July, everybody. I hope we have a wonderful weekend and we all have fun together. We all have different opinions, but we're still all friends. I know I have different opinions lots of times with my close friends that I see in here. We've all had arguments ourselves, but we have our ups and downs. I hope that we all celebrate our freedom and practice our freedoms as much as we can. And I'll see you all on the dump truck on tomorrow morning. So looking forward to it.
Thank you. Scott.
I will miss you all on the 4th, and I'm going to miss the dump truck, but everyone have a great 4th of July. It's all about American democracy. Tonight, another great example of Saugatuck. I'm so proud of everyone in this room for once again having a civil discussion about difficult issues. That is it's what makes our democracy great. So thank you, and I'll have a great 4th of July.
All right, Helen.
I just want to thank everybody for participating. Like I said earlier, democracy, I'm a big fan. You let your voices be heard. We listen to you. We've been listening to and working on this for 2 years. I don't take any of it lightly. I also own a home here. I want my property values to be high. I don't believe that we're going to be doing anything to negatively impact that. And I want you to know that I'm sincere, that I do think about these things. I'm going to have a different opinion than several of you. And I think that that's probably okay. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Just again, thanks everybody for attending today's meeting, as well as all the comments that have been shared with us. I continue to be humbled and proud to serve this community. What a smart place this is. And sometimes it's a challenge because people do bring up good questions and good topics, and they make me rethink things. My perspective shifts as it should, because as I learn more, hopefully I become a little bit more humble and better understanding of the community. My position based on today's discussion has not changed. I think this should be rejected for the reasons I mentioned. But again, it's a good reminder, and several speakers have said it today, is that I don't represent just those that vote for me. I represent those that come to this community and visit, the business owners. They're all very important to me. Ultimately, the voters decide whether I sit at this table or not, but that doesn't change my perspective in terms of who I represent. And it's a good reminder today that I represent a lot of different people and not just those that vote. So The voters are important, yes, but they're not the only people that I need to be concerned about as a responsible council member. So thank you for the reminder today.
All right, Holly.
Yeah, just again, adding my thanks to everybody else's. It's a good, healthy debate, and you know, I think we've all learned a lot through the process. So, also want to do another shout out to the Short-Term Rental Task Force, which did a lot of great work that got us to this discussion. So, thanks.
All right. So I will just say one last thing as far as my opinion on having a boutique hotel on Blue Star Highway. My point being, I have a lot of friends that own hotels in the area. The Twin Oaks Inn, the Bed and Breakfast, the different Wickwood Inn, they're lovely. They're fantastic. And I do know that the short-term rentals, they're a big competition for them. But if there's going to be growth in the area, the idea is like there's certain areas that we could grow. And that was just an idea to have other areas of town that could have growth where maybe the residential areas could cut back a little bit. So that's all I was saying about that. Okay, as far as this evening, could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right.
Second.
All right. All in favor say yes.
Yeah.
Enjoy music in the park.